After a good meal and a much-needed moment of peace, the Vault Hunters stepped back out into the cool mountain air of Meadowview. The warmth and music of Cedric's fizzies faded behind them as they made their way east along the winding cobblestone path. The town was beautiful in the late afternoon light. Rivers cut gently through the plateau, reflecting the golden sky while the distant waterfall thundered softly in the background. Lanterns had begun to glow along the roadsides, their warm orange light dancing against the lush greenery that surrounded every building. A few minutes into their walk, the trio came upon a massive structure overlooking one of the rivers. It was built in a similar style to Cedric's fizzies, beautiful timberwork, carved wooden beams, and flower boxes lining the windows, but this building was larger and quieter, carrying a more restful atmosphere. A large wooden sign swayed gently near the entrance. Meadowview Inn. Soft candlelight flickered behind the windows, and through the glass they could see travellers gathered around hearth fires, some eating quietly while others relaxed in cushioned chairs. The smell of fresh bread and burning cedar drifted from inside. Cliff glanced at it longingly. "Now that looks like a place I could sleep for 3 days straight." Suidas smirked. "You say that everywhere with a bed and alcohol." "To be fair," Cliff replied, "those are two of my favourite things." To the right of the inn stood a smaller wooden building tucked beneath a canopy of ivy-covered trees. Brightly lit windows revealed shelves lined with glowing bottles and bubbling concoctions. A painted sign above the door read, "Potions galore." The faint sound of glass clinking and liquids bubbling drifted out from within. Mr. Phantom glanced toward the shop. "Might be worth stocking up before we head farther into the mountains." Further down the dirt road, partially obscured by trees and a wooden fence, the Vault Hunters could spot the familiar silhouette of another building, larger, squatter, with weapon racks visible through the front windows. A gun shop. Even in a peaceful place like Meadowview, Pandora never let people forget what kind of world they lived in. The Vault Hunters stepped through the doors of the Meadowview Inn one after another, greeted instantly by warmth, crackling hearth fires, and the comforting scent of cedarwood and fresh stew. The interior was far more elaborate than any of them expected. Massive carved wooden pillars stretched up toward the ceiling, each etched with intricate depictions of creatures from across the Wonderlands. Some carvings showed snarling skags lunging from rocky terrain, while others portrayed elegant dragons spiraling through clouds and flame. Smaller carvings of wyverns, goblins, and even tiny mushroom creatures decorated the banisters and walls. The craftsmanship was astonishing, every scale, fang, and feather carved with loving detail. 2 broad wooden staircases curved upward from opposite sides of the room, leading to the inn's second floor. Between them sat a sturdy wooden desk, where a dwarf calmly sorted parchment and room keys beneath the warm glow of a lantern. He looked up as the Vault Hunters approached. The dwarf had a thick beard braided neatly down his chest and an enormous mustache that curled proudly at the ends. Resting on the desk before him sat a polished brass nameplate. Bledden Mellow Suidas gave him a polite smile. "Well, hello there." The dwarf's face lit up warmly. "How can I help you fellow travellers today?" His voice was deep and welcoming. "We've still got a few rooms available if you're looking to stay the night. 50 gold per room, breakfast included." There was something instantly likable about him. He spoke to them not like customers, but like old friends returning home after a long journey. Even the way he leaned forward slightly while listening carried a quiet sincerity. Meadowview clearly meant something to him. Suidas rested an arm on the desk. "Actually, we're looking for someone. A cleric named Elidir." At the mention of the name, Bledden's expression softened further. "Ah, Elidir." He gave a fond chuckle and leaned back in his chair. "One of the finest souls you'll ever meet. Man's got wisdom for days and patience thicker than mountain stone. Helps anyone who asks, sometimes even folk who don't ask." He folded his hands over his belly thoughtfully. "You'll usually find him at the tumbling temple across the river. Likes the peace up there. Says the sound of the waterfall helps him think." Bledden smiled faintly. "Wouldn't surprise me if half the town goes to him for advice before making any important decision." Cliff leaned casually against the counter. "Sounds like a good guy." "He is," Bledden replied immediately. Meadowview's better because of him. The innkeeper glanced between the three vault hunters, his warm demeanor never fading. You lot look like you've seen some rough roads lately. If you're heading to the temple, I'd recommend getting some rest first. Meadowview's safe. Safer than most places these days anyway. For the first time in what felt like forever, the vault hunters found themselves somewhere untouched by war and horror, at least for now. The day had been long. Longer than any of the vault hunters cared to admit. Between the horrors of Shadow Grove, the journey through the mountains, and the strange comfort of Meadowview, exhaustion had settled deep into their bones. Even Cliff, who normally insisted he could survive on liquor and bad decisions alone, looked ready to collapse. So they took Bledden up on his offer. The dwarf happily arranged rooms for them, insisting they eat a second helping of supper before turning in. By the time the evening had ended, the common room had grown quieter. Travellers drifted off to their beds. Candles burned lower. Somewhere downstairs a bard softly played a final tune before packing away his instrument. For the first time in what felt like ages, the vault hunters slept somewhere safe. No goblins, no Hyperius ambushes, no screaming demons. Just the sound of distant waterfalls and the gentle creaking of an old mountain inn. Suidas didn't know how long she'd been asleep when the dream began. At first there was only darkness, not the comforting darkness of night, the endless kind, the kind that stretched forever. Then came the sound, tick, a single metallic click, tick another, tick, slow, steady, growing louder. A shape emerged from the void, a grandfather clock, ancient, towering. Its wooden frame was blackened with age, carved with symbols she couldn't quite understand. The pendulum swung back and forth behind a cracked pane of glass. Tick, tock, tick-tock. The sound echoed through the darkness. Suidas found herself standing before it, unable to move. The clock hands spun wildly, hours, days, years, centuries. They spun faster and faster until the clock face shattered. Something pushed through the broken glass. A hand, not a human hand, a necrotic hand, grey and rotting, its fingers ending in blackened claws. The flesh hung from bone in strips, and yet it moved with purpose. It reached outward, toward her, toward the world beyond the clock. The darkness around the hand began to pulse, and then she saw it. An eye floating within the void, watching, waiting. An eye unlike any she'd ever seen. Ancient, intelligent, cruel. The same sickly necrotic energy wrapped around it like smoke. The eye turned, looking directly at her. Not through her, at her. The sensation was immediate, like being recognized, like being remembered. The hand reached farther from the shattered clock face. The eye widened, and somewhere in the darkness something whispered. A voice so faint she couldn't understand the words, yet somehow it felt familiar. The grandfather clock groaned, the hand stretched, the eye stared, and suddenly Suidas woke with a gasp. Morning sunlight poured through the inn's window. The sounds of Meadowview greeted her once more. Birds sang outside, the distant waterfall thundered peacefully. Somewhere downstairs she could smell fresh bread and breakfast being prepared. The dream was gone, mostly. But the image remained burned into her memory, a grandfather clock, a necrotic hand, and an eye, watching. Suidas made her way downstairs, still carrying the weight of the dream behind her eyes. The smell of breakfast filled the inn, fresh bread, fried eggs, sizzling meat, and hot coffee. At one of the tables, Mr. Phantom and Cliff were already seated, digging into their free meal like they hadn't eaten in days. Cliff looked up first. He paused mid-bite, studying her tired face. "Damn," he said, mouth half full. "You look like you fought a ghost in your sleep and lost." For a second, Suidas just stared at him. Then she smiled faintly, lifted one hand and gave him the middle finger. Cliff laughed into his plate. Mr. Phantom simply slid an extra piece of toast toward her, without saying a word. Suidas dropped into the seat beside them, grabbed something to eat, and tried to let the warmth of the morning push the nightmare away.